Well, that's not good. Let's pull this CV shaft out and replace it. We've got it jacked up, we've got the wheels off, and the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I can get this plug out. It's a 14 millimeter Allen, so I'm going to make sure that it'll loosen up. Once that loosens up, we could undo that, and I may undo it, but we really don't have to. We can drain it by just taking the cover off and just letting the oil dump out, which is probably what I'll do. I just don't think there's any need of messing with the drain plug, but we got to pull the cover anyway. So the reason you got to pull the cover is you got to undo these CV axles won't just pull out. You got to undo it in the differential, and so we got to pull the cover to do that. While we're there, we're going to go ahead and replace the seal right here, and I'm going to go ahead and do both sides because if you look, these are looking pretty sad. Oh, torn as well. I'm glad I ordered both. So inner one torn on the passenger side, outer one torn on the driver's side. So I'm glad I ordered 2 CV shafts. I would recommend you take a look at your CV shafts when you do this, and if they're looking cracked, do both sides. So I got all of the bolts out, and I recommend a 15 millimeter wobble socket. I mean, it worked perfect. You can get it with 15 millimeter with a wobble on it, or just a short one, but I mean, I was able to get up there and get those ones way up there, but I cannot get the ones where that transmission or that differential mount is, and it's just 4 bolts holding that. So I think what we're going to do, and that would allow us to drop the differential a little bit anyway, which probably would just make it easier to work on, but jack will be in the way of the drain pan. So went ahead and pulled the plug and drain it, and we'll let that drip for a little bit, and then we're gonna put the plug back in it, and then we'll undo these 4 bolts and pull this. We'll let the differential drop just a little bit. We'll pull that mount out, and then we can get to those other 2 bolts that are on top. It kind of mirrors this right here. You got 2 at the bottom, 4 on the sides, and 2 at the top. Well, I forgot about 2 bolts. So in your differential mount, you got 2 bolts. You can see I already got a socket on there, and they're probably 22 millimeters. I got a 7/8 on there, and I'm going to take those 2 out. There's one there and one right above it, and once those are off, this differential mount will come out. Went ahead and fast forwarded it on the other side just so I could give y'all some tips. So driver's side is done, and now let's come over here and do the passenger side. So differential is jacked back up. To get these axles out, we dropped it down so that we could get that cover off. But to get the axle actually out, you will need to jack it up. So the axle's too long. The further up the differential goes, basically the more distance you have. So just go ahead and jack it up and pin it all the way up against the body gently, because you're gonna need that room. So coming over here, in the center of your wheel, you've got a little bolt. You're gonna undo that bolt. I used a little impact and it came right out. You can set the emergency brake if you need to undo that. I need to look up torque spec for the other side. I have not done that yet. I just zipped it on real quick with the impact, little 3/8 impact, and we'll torque it later. And then you're gonna need to unbolt the caliper. Just come back here and undo that bolt. And where's the other one? I'm trying to look. That bolt. So once you undo those two bolts, just lay your caliper up here. Reason you have to do that is because the axle shaft is going to come out this way, so the caliper is kind of in the way and this brake hose is in the way. So just come over here, set it up on top of here. You can tie wrap it, do whatever. Just don't hang it from the brake hose. But I just set them up here. It's a little, they fit right there really nice. All right, so the other thing to note on this is when you're doing this, do not, you're gonna have it jacked up. Don't support it from under the control arm here, because you need it to drop. So just come over here, support it from over there, because you need, the axle shaft is just short enough to come out. So you're gonna need all the extension you can get. Differential all the way up, control arm all the way down. So let me do that real quick, and then I'm gonna bring y'all back. So we've got that bolt out, got the caliper off. You can see all that in the time lapse. Now we need to drive the axle shaft out of the hub. So you're gonna take a brass drift or punch, whatever you want to call it. I'm guessing a drift is solid and a punch tapers down. Y'all correct me on that, but just insert that into the hub, the center of the hub, and now it's up against the end of the axle shaft, and we're just gonna use a hammer and drive it out of the hub. And you can spray whatever lube you want in there if you want. Probably doesn't help any, but we do it anyway. And I take my favorite little hammer, a little mini little ball peen hammer. And that feels like that's it. So now we're going to go up under the car and pull the axle out. As you can see, hopefully, it is now out of the axle, or out of the axle's out of the hub. And just be careful here, because you do have a bearing on the back side of this that, I don't know if it's got some kind of a seal in it or whatever, but there's not a normal seal. I know there is some kind of a seal here, but I don't think you can get to it without pulling the bearing, and so we're not messing with that one. We will do the differential side seal, but we're not messing with anything over here. I thought about repacking these wheel bearings, and everything I was reading said when you're trying to pull the hub off, you can destroy the bearing. And most people said when they pulled theirs, it was fine, and they wish they hadn't messed with it. So we're just going to go that route. If we end up smoking a bearing at some point on this hub, I got a whole parts car. So, and see, we pulled it right away. So we are now out. I like to pull this out of the way a little bit, tilt it so when it goes back it's not resting up against that bearing like that. Looks like we at some point had some kind of some string wrap around that CV shaft. So now we need to go to the differential side, and there's a lot more to see there. Alright, I'm trying to work with the best I've got here, and I've got y'all zoomed in. Hopefully it's not too bad. So right here is the end of the axle shaft. I'm trying to stay out of y'all's way right here. And then what holds the axle shaft in the differential is this little clip. If you can see right there, there's a groove in the end of the axle shaft, and this clips in there. And it's got this little tang that's bent upwards towards the center of the differential, and it's got a hole in the center of it. So what you need to do is rotate the differential carrier, this is a carrier, around to where you have the open side facing you. And then you're going to need to rotate the axle shaft around to where this little tang is towards you. Now you can take it once you can get to it, and you can pull it around just like I did there. So now we've got it probably in an optimal position. I don't remember if I said it's got a hole in the center of it. So take you a good pick, or you can take some needle nose, some kind of pliers or whatever, whatever you feel is appropriate to get at this. I'm going to take this pick. This is just a snap-on, well-used pick that's been broken and ground, and we're about out. It's about to be a kind of a straight pick because we're running out of material here. I guess I could put a new bend on it, but I had this thing a long time. I wonder if they'd warranty it. But we're gonna try to stay out of y'all's way. We're gonna put that firmly in the center, or in that hole, and pull. And the clip went flying, and maybe I'll try to do a slow-mo there if I can, so y'all can see. And I heard it land somewhere, so I'll have to find it. But now, see? Well, you couldn't see. Goodness. I'm blocking y'all's view. All I did was just take my pick in here and push on the axle shaft. You can see it slid in. And I'll readjust y'all, and we'll pull the axle shaft out. So got y'all repositioned, and I found my little clip. You can see it's just kind of a half circle clip with little tangs on the end of it to hold it into that axle shaft, and then it's got this bent tang in the middle with a hole in it. I guess the word of the day today is tang, and it's not the orange drink. So that's our clip. We're going to hold on to that and don't lose it. Alright, so again, try to stay out of y'all's way, but we're going to take our axle shaft, pull it away, and just pull it out. Okay, now here's your something critical here. There should be a washer in here. Now, check the end of your axle shaft. I don't know if you can see the end of the axle shaft. Can you see that? So pick up the axle. Yeah, you can. Okay, so let's feel end of our axle shaft, and there is a washer. And that washer is it's basically like a machine bushing. There's different thicknesses washers, and that takes up the play between the bearing and the end of between this surface and here, basically, if y'all can see that. It sets that depth or distance so that there's not excess play in and out of the axle shaft into the differential. Does that make sense? So I'm I'm going to check real quick, make sure there's not one here. And there's not. That's just the bearing. No other washer. So we have one right here. I'm going to try to get off. And on the other side, this is what took the longest. And we'll talk about that for just a minute. So like I said, we're going to talk about this for a minute. If you don't want to hear about it, fast forward. But this is crucial, I feel like. And may not be applicable if you're rebuilding your same CV shafts. If you're doing that, just keep track of left and right, and keep track of your spacer left and right. Keep them together. I haven't measured this one, but the one on my other side was 48 thousandths thick. Now, when I put that spacer on my new axle shaft, and when I put it in the differential, there was not enough of this groove showing to get the clip on. Could not get the clip. Pulled the washer off, put it back in, and was able to get the clip on, but there was a lot of in and out slop on the differential, and I did not like it. Went through my stash of machine bushings. I've got a stash of these things, just universal ones. And I had some, but they were all thicker than this. We needed something thinner. So, what I did is I sanded it down. It took forever, but just on a flat surface of sandpaper, sanded it down to 25 thousandths. So basically, I just cut it almost in half. And that gave us the perfect amount of clearance to get a washer on, be able to get the clip on, and not have excess slop. So there's however you want to take that information. But if it were me and I was doing this again, I probably would have ordered. Couldn't find any that I could get quickly. So if I knew I was doing this job, I would just have some of these on hand. You can get them in like 5 thousandths increments or 5 thousandth spacers, but I probably would just order a 25 thousandths, 2 of those, and just have them. But your car could be different. Your axle shafts could be different. So Mercedes does, or at least they used to sell these, and they'd sell them in different thicknesses. My local Mercedes dealership, I don't even have a local Mercedes dealership, but the one that's the closest is about 35 miles away. They don't carry much of anything for these cars anymore. So pretty sure if I went in there and tried to get a thinner spacer, they're not going to have it. So I made do, and I just sanded that down. Now the downside of this is if I ever rebuild my axles, I need to, it's going to be too sloppy. I need a 48 thousandths shim in there. So that's what I said. I'm going to order some shims and just have those on hand. So if I ever have to do this again, I've got, some different sizes. I'll probably order a pack of 25, alarm. Probably order a pack of 25 thousandths and then a pack of 5 thousandths. So that gives us some play right there. If we need 2 25s, we can. If we need to stack some 5 thousandths, we can. That's kind of my thought there. So, like I said, do what you will with that information, but the ones I could find online were 1 1/4 inch inside diameter and 1 3/4 inch outside. I've not measured these, but it's possible that if you order one, you're going to have to grind down the outside a little bit to get it to fit, because it's got to be small enough on the outside diameter to fit around that seal. As you can see, this thing is just smaller than this diameter, and this is where our seal rides. So there's your information. Now, what we're going to do, I've got this on here now. I'll set up time lapse. We're going to pop the old seal out, we're going to put the new seal in. Once we put that in, I'm going to slide this axle shaft in with this machine. I'm going to call it a bushing, washer, shim, whatever, with this bushing. And I'm going to check the clearance here, see if I can get the clip in. If not, I'm going to go take this and sand it down. And if it's anything like the other side, this looks about the same thickness. I'm sure it's probably 48 thousandths. If it's anything like the other side, you know, if I look at it and see, I'm probably going to just go straight. The other one I did increments. I took 15 thousandths, or I took 10 thousandths off. Then I went 15, and then I went, what, 23? And that was a lot of in and out of getting this axle shaft in. So if it looks the same as the other side, then I'm going to just jump straight to getting this thing down to 25 thousandths and go that way. You know, it's probably going to be the same, is my guess. But anyway, we'll slide it in with it to see what it looks like. But, you know, if it looks the same as the other, I know it's not going to fit, or it's going to be too sloppy without it, and we'll shave it down. That's enough about that. I go OCD on stuff like this, of getting things just right, and I spent forever sanding this thing down, and I actually sanded the meat off my finger. I got a band-aid on it. I sanded it. It's about sanding my fingerprint off. Anyway, our seal. Now, two things about it. One, this thing is a booger to pop out, so you're going to see me struggle with that if it's like the other side. I do recommend I tried a seal puller on it, and I feel like I was going to break my seal puller. So one of the most handy things you can get is one of these Titan adjustable pry bars. This is the little mini size. This thing is so handy. And what's cool about these is you can push in on this and you can adjust it. It's very cool. So I can get that thing in there and get behind the seal, pop it out. Now, for driving it on, the new seal, I've got a set of seal drivers, but you cannot use a seal driver on these because it's got this raised part right here. And if you put something on the inside diameter of this, it's going to bend the inner part in. You need to drive from the outside. I started out with a punch, and it just was flopping it was popping out and all that kind of stuff. So I went to the hardware store and took my seal, and what I came up with was a 3-inch pipe plug, pipe cap, threaded one, and that fits perfect. I mean, it pretty much just holds the seal. I'm going to put some RTV on there, and I'll use this to drive that seal in. It worked perfect. Worth the $4 I paid for this. So now we've got Mercedes tool 123 579 3479er. That's official Mercedes part number for this thing. Anyway, works great. Definitely recommend, if you're doing this job, let's go get yourself a 3-inch pipe plug, cap, whatever you want to call it. Worth the money. And just be careful with it, hammer it in there so you don't crack this thing or whatever it is, PVC. So, I'm going to set up time lapse and do all that and bring y'all back when we start reassembly, putting clip on, all that kind of stuff. Okay, y'all saw me wrestling with that axle shaft. It can be a bear. Just slide in there, spray it with some WD-40 or something to help lube it and slide it in. And once you're going in with it, you'll probably have to be kind of turning it to get it to mesh with the gears, or the spider gear, the splines and the spider gear right there. So as you can see, hopefully, there's not enough space there to get the clip in. We can barely see the groove. So I'm gonna pull it back out, try it with no spacer, and let's see how much space we have, because I think it's a tighter fit than the other side. You know, there's probably some variances in the manufacture of these axles. Well, I'm going to apologize in advance because it's very tight quarters here, and I'm going to try to stay out of y'all's way so you can see, but I can't guarantee it. So, we basically have to install this. Now, you know, I've got some little needle nose pliers like this that work pretty good to get it in there, or just come in here. Actually, I'm gonna put some blue sticky stuff on here, transmission assembly goo. I'm gonna try to get this up in here, started in that groove, and it is. So now I'm gonna take a screwdriver. Come on, stay there. Shoot. Screwdriver's magnetic. Not what I wanted. Okay. Yeah, it's not working like I wanted it to. Stay. Let's see again. This is me blocking y'all's view. What if we go upside down? Alright, I'm now upside down, but I can't see what's on the screen. But I think I'm out of your view, but I am going to have to put a punch right in here, which is probably going to block. Or we can try putting it right there. Okay. If I can just push it in. There. Hopefully y'all can see that. Push the clip in. So what I'm going to do now is check in play. So if we wedge this in here, I mean, let's just see. We got more out of it than I thought. Let's see if we clunk. Yep. We did not get lucky. Alright, let's go sand down a shim. Oh boy. Fun stuff. So, I'll bring y'all back. I'm going to take probably, we're going to need more than the other one. I'm probably going to sand this thing down to about 15 thousandths. It's going to be really thin. But I think that's about what we're going to need to take up that slop. So off camera, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to pull that clip back out. You didn't see it the first time, you can see it again. It goes flying again, but I see it. I'm going to pull that out and go sand down a shim. Fun stuff. So we got it in. So I shaved it down to 30 thousandths. Slipped the axle shaft in, could tell it needed to go more. Then I did 25, it still needed more. And I ended up at 20, and it's a perfect fit. The other side was 25. You know, I guess there's just some differences in these axles, but we can rotate the clip around easily. We can't feel any end slop. There's just enough to just barely take up any. If you wedge a screwdriver between that cross pin and the axle shaft, you can just barely get maybe I don't know, couple thousandths. And so it's got that much free play, which is about what it had originally. You know, if I wedged something in there and had just a little bit of play in there. But yeah, so we're going with that. I'm sure there's some spec, and I'm sure there's some way that Mercedes wants you to measure these. I just went by how much play I could get in the old axle as I adjusted the left side. I was checking the free play on the right side, and that's how I got that one. And then I did the opposite. Since I got that one like the original one, I judged those two sides when I did the right one. So that's what we got. That's what we're going with. I feel like I went way OCD on this. You know, me personally, I would not run that with no shim in there with these axles. It was just too sloppy. You could hear it clunk. I just don't like that. I feel like people probably do that. I feel like people who are ordering these axles are probably not going to this level of effort, and they're probably not having any issues, but I personally would not recommend doing that. But I would recommend, if you're going to put aftermarket axles in, have some shims handy to be able to do this. You know, sanding these shims down is not fun. I'm going to jack this thing up to make sure it is all the way up against there. Then we're going to insert the axle shaft into the hub and start reassembly. All right, I'm going to try to work around y'all. Y'all have not worked on a car with a camera. You should try it sometimes. I get some negative comments about camera placement and can't see and all that, but I mean, it's difficult when you're up under a car sometimes to be able to work around the camera. So I'm straddling y'all. So you can see we've got our axle shaft and we've got it down. You're going to kind of work it into this bearing or hub. Be careful, there's a little lip here and it's peened over in a couple spots. I think that's what locks it. Oh, we got string. That string that was on the axle shaft is wrapped around here. So let's get that off. Is that... Let's get our light over here. Y'all can see pretty good, but I can't. The camera's pretty good. Let's see. Try not to wash out the light. Too bad. Is that? I really like this. Let's see. That's pretty good right there. Okay, so we'll pull this out. So like I said, this thing is peened over in a couple spots, like right here and right here. Be 180 from each other. 180? 360? At the 180 marks, I guess. And so, if you look where it is peened over, it's a little bit smaller. It's not sticking out as high. That's what you want to say, however you want to say it. But the other thing to do while you're here is you can turn these. You can kind of feel your bearing, but mine feels fine. That's the rotor rubbing. We can actually pull the rotor off if we want to. And just check those rear bearings while you're here. But I mean, that's the thing rubbing over here. That is not our bearing. It's part of the emergency brake rubbing. Man, that thing's annoying. Why is it rubbing? It's the little spring thing on the emergency brake shoes. There we go. The bearing feels really good. But just something to do while you're here. The other side was good too. So I'm going to rotate this with that facing here, because we're going to come in with the axle shaft about like that, and it's going to be very tight. You're going to see me struggle with this. We're going to try to shove this in and just bend this joint around to where it'll go in here, and it's going to put up a fight. And we're going to do some prying, make sure that thing is shoved in all the way. But I've fought with this for a while on the other side. And this side's even tighter. Let's see. You can see we got a lot to make up here. Okay, so we've got it that far. Kind of bend it, the joint, this tip of the joint towards you, and got it that far. If we can bend that joint that far, or that much more, we might get a little bit more out of it, or bend it back this way. We're just going to play with bending it around and rotate this to where that spot is. Yep, that just gave us just the perfect clearance. That little thing right there. And then we're gonna just hit that with some WD-40. Rotate our hub and slide it in. That is probably some key information there, because that is the only spot that thing will go in. I'm getting that, where that, and what that is it's like a locking collar, and they peen it over to lock on that nut, and that where it's peened over, it's just got the slightest bit more clearance, and you can get the end of that axle shaft shoved in there. So we are in. So now I'm not going to be happy if these axles don't hold up, because all that work we did with those shims, they better last. I might would rebuild my old ones next time. Anyway, so let me show y'all the end nut here. We'll put that on, and then we'll torque it. I need to look up torque specs on that. We'll do that. And then the rest of it, I'm probably going to throw it on time lapse. We're going to basically clean the cover up, and I'm going to spray some brake cleaner in there, kind of wipe it out, clean the differential up. I did buy a gasket, but there's no gasket up from the factory. So I've got some gray RTV. We're going to use that instead of a gasket. So let's talk real quick about the bolt that goes through there. So my axles came with a hardware kit. Came with this little guy, which I don't know what this is. It doesn't really fit in there. So I'm not sure what that's for. I mean, I guess I could squeeze it in there, but yeah, I don't know what that's for. Mine didn't have anything like that. We're not going back to anything like that. So it did come with a bolt and a spacer, like the original one did. So we've got the axle shaft shoved all the way in. If we use their spacer, you can see it's actually, I don't know if you can tell, but it's sticking out maybe 1/8 of an inch, a little over that. And if we look at our original spacer, it's close to 1/4 of an inch longer. And the bolt is the same way. The bolt's that much longer. So check that, because that's not going to be correct. It's not going to tighten up all the way. It's going to be sloppy. You're going to have end play. That bolt is supposed to hold that axle shaft tight in there, and if that spacer sticks out, it's only going to tighten up to that spacer, and that spacer sticking out 1/8 of an inch, so you're going to have 1/8 of an inch of slop in that axle. So I'm going to reuse my old bolt. It's 95 Newton meters torque on this thing. I looked it up. That's with the M12 head. If you've got one that's got an M8, it's a lower torque spec. I don't know what that one is, but 95 Newton meters, which is about 70 foot-pounds of torque. I put some blue Loctite on it. I'm going to run it up the impact, then I'll go back later and torque it. So I'm going to just start that by hand. We're going to run this guy up. This impact's good. Put it on auto and it doesn't over torque anything. Run this up. And then torque that to 70 foot-pounds. And you can put the emergency brake on or something like that and hold it. Or have somebody hold the brakes, you know, put their foot on the brake while you torque it. So, alright, so I'm going to set up time lapse. We're going to do some reassembly just like it came off. I think that was, this little thing was the last bit that I wanted to show y'all. Do I recommend these axles? I don't know. I mean, obviously there's some difference in the clearances in their manufacturing process than the original Mercedes axles, and even in their own axles there seems to be a difference, because that was a 48 thousandths shim on both sides, and we had a difference of about 5 thousandths in their axles, basically, you know, because the fit on my original axles was the same side to side, and theirs was 5 thousandths different. So I don't know. We'll see how they hold up. So yeah. So we're back together. The only thing I've got left is top off the, well, not top off, fill up the gear oil, and I want to let that silicone on the cover set up for a little bit before I do that. So we're just gonna wait on that. So here's our differential mount. This was, of course, my old one. You can see it's got some cracking in it. It wasn't too bad, but I did have a new one, so a good made in Germany one, male, M-E-Y-L-E, male, however you want to pronounce it. Had one of those in stock, so went ahead and put that on. I like to keep parts for these cars. I got 2 of them, so keep some of the stuff in stock in case I'm doing stuff like this. And one thing to note, if you notice, it is different. There is a correct orientation of it. So if you look at our old one, that's where the washers were, and so that curved side goes on the outside, and then the flat side goes up against the differential. So make sure you get that right. And that's it. Like I said, just need to put gear oil in it. The really only issue on this is those shims. So just, yeah, I don't know what to tell you on those. I think I've beaten that horse to death. But yeah, just play with it, you know, push your stock axles in and out, you know, wedge a screwdriver in there and push it out, then wiggle it back in. Just watch it, see how much in play I guess it's got, and try to match that. Like I said, there's probably some Mercedes tool or measurement tool or way to measure it or spec. I didn't do any of that. I just tried to mirror what was already there, and this thing's made it 40 years, so almost 40 years. Anyway, yeah, you won't have an issue if you're just replacing the CV boots on your original axles. And I would almost bet if you had another set of OEM axles that you're putting in there, I bet Mercedes tolerances are tight enough that it would probably work. But aftermarket, you just never know what you're gonna get. Like I said, I would hindsight, I would have, you know, a little assortment of those shims to make this job easier, but you definitely can sand them down and make them work, which is what I did. It just took forever. So that's it. We're gonna end this one here. This video is probably extremely long, and if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below. Let me know, you know, it's always a balance between time lapse and showing it real time, because, you know, these jobs, if I show them real time, you know, we end up with super long videos that no one watches. I say no one watches. You know, the watch time on it's like 5 minutes. You know, average duration watch time is like 5 minutes of a 25-minute long video. You know, I've lost interest in people. So let me know what you think. I try to balance it out, you know, the important stuff I'll show you, and then the rest I'll time lapse so you can kind of see it. Yeah. So again, hit that like button if this helped you out, if you enjoyed it. Subscribe. Got a lot of videos to make on this car, and I've got another one. I've got a 300D sitting right behind me, and this 300 TD. Good cars. I definitely recommend one, as long as you like to work on them. You know, I feel like you could probably get nickel and dimed from a Mercedes mechanic if you didn't want to do the work yourself. So anyway, see you on the next one.